Joining us now is Richard Reid, who's the co-founder of Innocent Smoothies and also the deputy chairman of Stronger Inn, and also Alan Horsell, who's the entrepreneur, who's the owner of Silver Cross Prams and is also on the board of the Vote Leave campaign. Welcome to you.
Marvellous. We can hear two very clear arguments on either side as people have 100 days to make up their minds.
Go on, off you go. No, let me start by saying this. I mean, I watched that sort of rather sickly video, from Cameron, and it's like, there he is. If we leave, we're all going to die. Is basically what he's saying, right? In a million different ways. And we're hearing this from both sides. So I guess my question for you is, you produce great stuff, Innocent Smoothies and so on. Speak in a language I can understand. That makes me believe what you're telling me.
OK, well, I'll just tell you my story. I'm a guy that left Yorkshire, moved down to London to set up a juice business that I started from selling bottles of smoothies from a market stall. 15 years later, I've got a big business that's trading with 17 countries across Europe. The growth of that company, Innocent, was only possible because I could export into the EU. Now, you could look at that and go, OK, well, good for that guy, he had a good business. But in terms of what it did for the economy, 80% of the products that we make, we sell into the EU. 80% of the people we employ is right here in the UK. It's a classic example of why having access to the biggest free trade zone in the world right on our doorstep is a great opportunity for everyone, and it makes things cheaper.
Right, but if you want it
just for the average guy on the street, it's cheaper when you go into the supermarket, it's cheaper when you go on holiday, and if you speak to anyone that understands about security terrorism, saying we're just a lot safer.
Breathe. Everyone likes your smoothies, that's why they're buying them, and that's why you're exporting them so much.
Other smoothies are available.
Other smoothies are equally good, apparently, allegedly. Why are you so worried that they would suddenly say, well, we're not going to have them, or damage your business? I mean, why should it change?
Because it just brings sand into the machine. At the moment, what the EU allows you to do is to have access to 28 countries with one set of rules. If you come out of the EU, then you could be dealing with each country individually. I export to one country outside of the EU. We have to hand label every single bottle to put on a little bit of extra information that they want for that market. It just makes it easier.
Well, I like the way... Well, first of all, I'd like to say I watched that video with interest. I noticed the Prime Minister talked about Europe. I love Europe. My problem is actually with the EU. And, Richard said trading with 28 countries. I actually believe that this country should be trading around the world, and we should be getting free trade agreements around the world. And what concerns me is that we're not getting those free trade agreements. We haven't had a reformed EU. The Prime Minister came back from Brussels. He said we were going to get reform. The CBI said we'll back the Prime Minister if we get reform. We haven't got that reform. They're not even talking about that reform now. What we want to do on Vote Leave is we want it very, very simple. Let's take back control. Let's take back control of our borders. Let's take back control of our democracy, and let's take back control of our trade and
These are myths. I have to say, because this is important, these are myths that we don't have. We have control of our borders. It's just a myth that we do not.
I want to ask Alan. Richard said the EU is essential because so much is sold to the EU. You say you want to sell around the world. Why is leaving the EU a problem? I mean, sorry, you want to leave the EU. Why would that not cause a problem in terms of business selling to the EU?
Like Richard, I ran Silver Cross. I rescued Silver Cross in 2002.
Did you not benefit from membership of the EU selling your products?
Well, I sold my product all across Europe, like Richard did, but I also sold my product in China, I sold my product in America, I sold my product in Australia and the Middle East.
So you were able to do that while being a member of the European Union?
Of course, because free trade... This country is the most marvellous trading nation. It's been a trading nation for hundreds of years. The fact that we leave the EU isn't going to mean we're not going to trade with the EU. We're going to get a free trade deal with the EU. And, Richard talks about regulations and all this. Of course we have to deal with regulations. If I sell my prams to China, I have to deal with Chinese regulations. If I sell my prams to America, I have to deal with American regulations. So there isn't...
OK, let me bring in Richard.
I guess this is my point. We have access to the EU, and it's a brilliant thing, and we can trade with every country in the world as well. It's a pointless negative step to come out of this thing, because the very first thing, and even your guys admit this, the very first thing we're going to want to do as soon as we come out of the EU is start negotiating to get back into it. It's a completely zero-sum game.
No, we're not going to get back in. We'd never say we're going to get back into the EU.
You want to trade to the free trade zone, and you know this is
just hang on,
fact. If you're going to trade with them, we have to comply by the legislation, so there's no win.
Excuse me one second. There is no other political union in the world. There are free trade groups in North America, in South America with Mercosur, in Asia. Why do we need... When we voted in 1975, we did not vote for a political union. We voted for a free trade area. What we want to do is bring back that free trade area. Yes, we want free trade. Yeah, there are friends in the EU, of course they are. But, you know, there's not one country from Iceland...
Let me jump in. Let me ask Richard. You see, I asked someone a question earlier. I suspect if you'd been on my sofa when we had the Euro debate about whether we should go into the Euro, I would imagine if you were in this position right now, like many young entrepreneurs at the time, you'd have said, we've got to be in the Euro. I don't want to speak for you, but most people did, I remember.
No, I definitely not, because I want to have the hedge that we... This is the other thing that's really interesting.
Let me make my point. Let me make my point. I accept what you say. But most did, because I remember we ran them all in the Daily Mirror. And I was running.
I did.
Right, but let me make my point. I remember the exact same scaremongering about this, which was that if we don't go into the Euro, it's going to be a complete disaster. And it wasn't a disaster. In fact, it's a very good argument to say it's been very beneficial to this country to be out of the Euro. So I say to you, this scaremongering to me sounds very similar to what we heard about the Euro.
I understand what you're saying, but my very first word that came out of my mouth was a great opportunity being part of the EU. I'm not saying there's some terrible disaster is going to happen. I'm just saying it's better in.
Okay.